Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. In this episode, I wanted to discuss some of the false reporting that was coming out of the Department of Defense, specifically the Pentagon, reported by Pentagon spokespersons. And what I've heard, and this occurred about 48 hours ago, that the United States, the Department of Defense, did not have readily available Abrams tanks to hand over to the Ukrainians. Now, whether you think it's right or wrong that the Ukrainians would get the Abrams and how much of an effect that system would have on the battlefield is really irrelevant to me in terms of why I'm creating this video. The reason why I'm creating this video is the Pentagon is outright lying. The Pentagon is saying they simply don't have the Abrams tanks to hand over to the Ukrainians. Well, whether it's M1A1s, it's M1A1 Heavy Commons, it's M1A2s, it's M1 A2 SEP3s. It doesn't matter. An A2 versus an A1. Yes, an A2 has more capabilities. It does have the hunter-killer system and some other capabilities as well. But in the end, look, an A1 readily handed over to the Ukrainians is going to be fairly close to as effective as an A2. It is not going to be like handing over, let's say, an M60, an older M60, or older upgraded T-72s that the Polish are handing over, like the PT-91s, and then comparing that to an Abrams. But what I wanted to show you on this video is the fact that the United States has thousands of these tanks in various storage locales. And the Pentagon is saying they have to actually produce these M1A2s to then hand over to the Ukrainians, which is ridiculous. They don't have to do that. And more importantly, when they say they don't have tanks available, they are lying. They are being deceitful. Government never does that, does it? So let's start with the Army reorganization that has taken place within the U.S. Armored Command, the U.S. Heavy Combat Brigades, and why we have excess tanks now. It's not just the downsizing of U.S. divisions and the elimination of heavy combat divisions and heavy combat brigades that occurred in the last 20, 30 years. It's the reorganization that has taken place as well. When I was in the Army, a U.S. tank battalion consisted of 56 tanks, 58 tanks. Basically, in a U.S. armored battalion back in the early 90s, a tank battalion consisted of 4 companies of 14 tanks in each company. And then you had you had the battalion colonel and then his executive officer, who also had 2 tanks. So again, in total, 14 tanks per company, with 4 companies in each battalion. So you have a total of 58 tanks. The U.S. Army did some reorganization, and obviously many of you know this. And those armored battalions and even the mechanized infantry battalions were reshaped and reformed, where they had 3 companies. They were then modular combat arms units, where, as before, a tank battalion had no Bradleys. armored infantry fighting vehicle, as did a mechanized infantry battalion have no tanks. So you had mechanized infantry battalions, all Bradleys, armored battalions, all tanks. And then what they did, they reduced one of the companies. They took one armored company or one mechanized infantry company, reduced it, and then if it was a heavy armored battalion, it would then go to 2 armored companies, 28 tanks, and then 1 Bradley company. If it was a heavy infantry company, armored infantry company, then it would have 1 tank company and 2 companies of Bradleys. So you would have 28 Bradleys and 14 tanks, and then you would also have the battalion commander and his executive officer. So 31 tanks or 31 Bradleys, plus the Bradley or the tank component augmenting that force as well, which would be another 14 tanks or Bradleys. So we had that reorg occur, and then compounding that, the reduction in the Army has led to just thousands of these vehicles being available. And what I want to show you right now is the Sierra Army Depot. And I don't know when this satellite was taken, but this is just one site among a multitude of sites. I know that in North Fort Hood, Texas, they have Abrams stored there. There are sites in Germany where there are Abrams stored. There are sites in the Middle East, Kuwait, where there are Abrams stored. So let's just have a look at this. So if you look here, these are Abrams main battle tanks. And this row is about 70 tanks. So just this, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows of 70 tanks. And yes, they're sitting out in the elements. There are places where they have tanks stored inside as well, out of the elements. Now, this is a very dry climate that was picked. This area was picked specifically because tanks sitting out in the open like this would not be exposed to a lot of moisture. If we go to other areas of this base, and again, this is the Sierra Army Depot. Again, there's probably 1,000 tanks at this base. And you can see these tanks, while stored here, they are still in an area where they can be regularly serviced. Do you see how they have them stored? You see how the turrets are rotated? They're keeping these tanks up and running. And this is not a maneuver division. These are just tanks that are sitting in storage. So why is the Department of Defense lying about or being untruthful and saying they don't have tanks that they can send to the Ukrainians? Look how many tanks are here. Look at this. I don't know. Someone will go to this base and count, I imagine. And again, probably 1,000 tanks at this base. Look at this. Tanks forever. This is what a U.S. Army tank battalion used to look like. Now it's a little different. But, and again, not just tanks at this base. You got all kinds of armored vehicles. M113s, Bradleys. Just, it goes on forever. Ammunition. Massive amounts. So when the Pentagon says it doesn't have tanks available to hand over to the Ukrainians, it's being untruthful. So why are they lying to the American public when any American can jump on Google Earth and see they're being untruthful? Just curious. Go back over to this side of the base. Again, just tons. Anyway, I think you get the idea. So then the question is, why? Have a good day.